Hi, everybody. I'm Chunka Moy. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this International Insurance Society webinar on innovation, transformation, and sustainability in the insurance ecosystem. I am an advisor to the IIS on innovation, and I'm joined today by three really exciting panelists to talk about this topic. I will, in a moment, ask them to introduce themselves so I don't mess that up. But I just want to frame this conversation by saying that, in our research with IIS members and our discussions with the industry overall, digital transformation in the context of sustainability is a topic that constantly comes up, right? Both because of what we need to do to be successful and what we need to do for our role in society. So this conversation today is about, well, what the heck does that mean? And how do we get there, right? And that's the context in which we want to have this conversation. That's the context in which we hope you will engage with us. And hopefully there's a great opportunity to follow up not only with us as a panel, but also the individuals as these conversations come up. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to spend just maybe about 30 seconds, 60 seconds telling us about themselves, their role in their organizations, and most importantly, what perspectives and focus areas they bring to this conversation. And Jonathan, can I start with you?
Sure. So my name is Jonathan Silverman. I'm with Microsoft Corporation. I'm an insurance industry executive. So my focus is on the business of insurance. I'm not considered a technologist within the company. My focus is on the modernization of core systems and the use of data and AI to improve insights and experiences. So really moving from just protecting an asset to thinking more about predicting and preventing incidents and accidents.
Great, thank you. James.
Hi, thanks, Chaka. Yeah, so my name is James Maudsley. I am the Global Digital Lead for Insurance at Equinix. Equinix is the world's global infrastructure company. I am really there to help both our internal people and our customers and prospects begin to understand insurance and what's going on in it. I am, by profession, an insurer and have worked in the London insurance market since 1990.
Great, thanks, James. Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg Clark. I'm the Global Head of Integrated Network Services in Zurich, and I have responsibility for the service delivery of network and security operations across the company. And I am a technologist, have been throughout my career, and I'm bringing to this discussion a perspective around our transformation and what that transformation means to our future, but more importantly, how we're bringing a digital future into an insurance scope. And how that is going to be a tangible benefit, not just to the company itself and delivering its obligations to its customers, but to our customers as well.
Great, thank you, Greg. And welcome to all of you for this, sure to be a exciting conversation, provocative, interactive. And I'll warn the audience that I've invited the panelists to jump in where they would like, but I reserve the right to direct the conversation as we go. So, Greg, let me start with you. So we're talking about the insurance ecosystem writ large. Zurich, of course, plays a role in multiple parts of that. We're also talking about transformation and sustainability. And there's no argument that, in order to transform yourself, to become more sustainable, you need to innovate. But what the heck does that mean? And I thought that one way of sort of defining what it means is giving a sense of what you think of as success. Right, because if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter how you get there, as the old saying goes. So tell us from a Zurich standpoint, what does success look like in 5 years in terms of digital transformation and sustainability?
So, when we first began our digital transformation journey and our sustainability efforts that tie to them, we used to think it was all about, well, if we reduce the footprint of our data centers, then that's success. We went from 100 data centers to 60 data centers. Now we're down to roughly about 6 or 7 over the last few years. And as we were evolving that, we said, well, that's pretty good success. But it really didn't have much more benefit to the world itself, the customers we serve. It was more of a benefit to the company and its sustainability. So we started to look a little bit deeper and align ourselves more toward what can we deliver to the communities that we serve, the customers that we serve, and deliver a tangible benefit that our customers are going to recognize as something that is important to them and also important to the company in the way we deliver goods and services to our customers. So we established a sustainability program that not just looks at things that are, I'll call them material from an infrastructure perspective, but things that contribute to managing and moderating the climate change that we're going through. And it's important for us to register that, because as we go through staffing and recruiting efforts through the years, we're noticing there's a shift in thinking. There's a shift in the way the world is operating today. The resources that we bring on board have a different mindset, which means our customers have a different mindset as well toward the environments in which they live. They want a company, they want to deal with a company, and those companies that they deal with to have a positive influence and be engaged with the environments or whatever services they're delivering. It's not just the insurance companies as well, but it's about how we manage risk, how we contribute to that climate change, so that things that we are now seeing are contributors to, whether it's natural disasters or whether it's just shifts in the environments themselves in areas that we insure, we are making positive contributions to control, mitigate, and have a positive impact so that we can manage that risk much better on behalf of our customers.
Wow,
And we're doing that.
I was going to say that is what some people would say a big, hairy, audacious goal. Right?
It is.
Yeah. So please go on. How do you think about that? Especially, how do you think about that? Sort of in a less than 30-year kind of time frame. How do you think about that in a 5-year time frame?
Yeah. So we looked at it in chunks. I'll say we have 1-year goals, 5-year goals, and of course we have the 10-year goals as well. And in the 1-year time frame, we've decided that we're aligned to the Paris Accord. We're aligned to doing things with scientific measurements that demonstrate our success toward our goals. So it's not just about setting a pie in the sky and say, well, we're going to reduce our overall travel, and travel will reduce by, our goal right now is 70%, but we set that goal against a 2019 base. So 70% is what our reduction in travel is going to be, and that's air travel. But we're also looking at combustible engines. By 2025, we'll have all of our combustible engines out of our fleet. By 2029, we'll have converted all over to electric vehicles. So that'll be any type of hybrid or combustible will be out of our fleet vehicles. We are contributing trees through a charitable institution in Brazil to replenish the Atlantic rainforest in the region. So we're doing things that sit outside of the company as well, not just looking inside the company. And those goals and those measures that we're promoting are all aligned with world type organizations. So we're using the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals to measure our success. We have 6 that we are currently aligned with today. And we have to report on that. And we have a sustainability report that is an annual report that demonstrates how we are measuring in that short-term and long-term space, so that you really see the tangible difference we're making rather than just taking our word for it. And then, of course, we are audited as part of that governance process. E&Y provides an independent assurance report based on the sustainability report that we publish on behalf of the company.
Wow, that's fascinating. And we're going to get back to some of the details you just laid out. But I want to give Jonathan and James the same question. Jonathan, from a Microsoft perspective, how do you think about transformation and sustainability, and what does success look like in 5 years?
That's a great question. From our perspective, obviously, we do a lot around ESG and sustainability, right? A great example would be our, working to create data centers underwater. I'm sure you've seen that. And what we're using is the waves for power and the water for cooling. So there are a lot of things that we're doing from an R&D perspective, and we do this so that we can share it with our customers, with our partners, et cetera. A lot of our customers come to us to ask about what Microsoft is doing from an ESG perspective. I think we said we wanted to be carbon neutral by 2030, like completely. So we're doing a lot of work around that. But again, when I think about climate change, we all have to do this as a team, right? It's not something that any one of us does. It's really a global effort, because while we can be focused on moving towards electric vehicles, for example, how are we powering those vehicles today? And are we still using carbon sources in order to do that? But, I talk to a lot of customers about their modernization journeys, right? And how they're trying to modernize. And, if I was building a new company today, I think I'd make sure that it was born in the cloud, right? Because I want to be agile. I want to be focused on the customer first. Something similar to what Greg said, right? Is how do I focus on changing those experiences? Because the next generation of customers and employees are different than we are. They want things to happen in 2 clicks. Waiting 6 weeks for a life insurance policy is just not going to work for them. And that's why we're seeing more and more carriers look at SaaS models, right? Software as a service, where somebody else is managing that environment for them, and using AI and ML and data in order to get greater insights, create differentiated experiences. And, I said earlier, I mentioned predict and prevent, right? Rather than just, covering somebody's vehicle in case of damage, I think the future is all about protecting the people within that vehicle. And if there is an accident, being able to react very quickly and to be able to protect the individuals within the car. So it's not just about, paying the claim on an asset, but it's providing a differentiated value proposition that is more about the customer need, as opposed to just, protecting a piece of the life. It's protecting everything and creating a value that's differentiated, and that speed to value is becoming critically important.
That absolutely, and especially the notion of the customer experience. I mean, we look back 5 years, and 5 years ago, we wouldn't have imagined that we would have had the kind of change in experience, both inside and outside the organization, that we have, in large part enabled by technology. So I want to definitely come back to this question of what does the experience look like in 5 years? But before I do that, James, how does your firm think about success in the 5-year timeframe around transformation and sustainability?
So I think really I take it from 2 perspectives. The first is to say that in terms of sustainability, or the sort of larger ESG sort of picture, if you like, Equinix has extremely strong beliefs about this, a very deep value chain when it comes to considering these issues. And we've won numerous awards for various things contained within the ESG picture. And so we're very proud of what we've done with that. We're very proud of the way it's been received by the analysts globally. So but that's really for very much focusing on what we do internally, and as an organization that I suppose does use very significant amounts of electricity around the world. Obviously, fundamentally, I think it's our duty to do exactly that. But the second part of it really is the way we serve and partner with the likes of Microsoft, the way we serve the likes of Zurich as actually our customers. And that is where we see what we do as being able to assist them in their ESG sustainability goals, in as much as we can provide or help to provide more effective ways of working. I mean, for example, Jonathan was just referring to the whole ESG position and their attitude towards customers. I think we would certainly support that. We believe that through the use of digital, as Greg was talking about, use of digital, companies can improve their offering. They can make it more efficient. And fundamentally, I suppose from our point of view, it really comes down to 3 things. And this, hopefully answers the final part of your question of where would we hope things would be in 5 years' time. And we would hope that firms will continue to migrate to what we would refer to as a sort of core and digital edge and ecosystem model, where they have highly effective, highly efficient access to cloud services, for example, at their core, where they do their centralized work. That they look to their digital edge, where their customers and their users exist, where data is created, where data is manipulated. And referring to a few things specifically in the insurance market about, for example, data-driven risk management, the collection and rapid use of data is going to become vital to that effort of improving that situation. And then finally, Equinix has always believed in ecosystems. We've been, for 20 years now, we've been curating collections of like-minded organizations, ecosystems around in our data centers. And at that point, that's where you really begin to get the answers for the future, where I think SaaS was mentioned. Well, SaaS services can make themselves available in an ecosystem. Rapid communication services can make themselves available to the users in an ecosystem. And there they can come together and really sort of begin to leverage digital, because without all areas, all sections of the supply chain, digital will never achieve its true potential, this enormous potential it has. For Greg on the delivery side to serve his customers and make their lives better, cater for the mishaps in life that many people go through, and on the Microsoft side for Microsoft to continue doing their great work with their various systems, with their cloud services and so on. So I think that's where we would hope to see it in 5 years' time, a proper adoption of core, of digital edge, and of ecosystem.
Great. So, let's drill into this some more. And Greg, you were the only person who acknowledged yourself to be a technologist in the introduction.
That might be not be a good thing, but
but of course, one of the things we're talking about here is in order to serve that larger purpose that you talked about, which is essentially risk management. You're in the business of risk management, whether that's in a prediction or prevention side. And to do that in a much more effective way in 5 years or tomorrow requires digital transformation, right? And James talked about some key elements of that. So let's step back from the big picture and drill narrowly into digital transformation, if we can call that a small thing. What are the key issues? Jonathan talks about the cloud. James talks about migrating to the edge and ecosystems. What are you most worried about in this journey to that goal that you described in terms of how you're going to deliver that digital transformation?
Yeah, it's interesting. James, you mentioned data and data and data. and the big thing for us right now are data lakes. Jonathan, you mentioned all the buzzwords, about big data and this and that, but data lakes, we're doing data lakes as well. And I think for us, it's identifying how to use that data, that digital data. So if you were to ask me what keeps me up at night, it is about getting things that are ready, that are legacy today, ready to transition to a cloud environment and take that digital journey with us. We have a lot of legacy applications that were not meant to be delivered in a cloud infrastructure or cloud environment, and they're not usable in that format. So the journey for us, which we kicked off last year, has been quite challenging, because each application, each infrastructure as a service, software as a service, however you want to look at it, that we want to put into the cloud and take advantage of, we are rewriting. It's not just a lift and shift. We're literally digging in, opening up the hood, redoing the engine, rebuilding it to make it usable in the cloud. Because what is usable in the cloud is a very different sort of characterization when it comes to software and infrastructure, not just for us as a company, our contact centers that are serving our customers, but our customers as well when they're engaging with us. And you have to, on that digital journey, and I think this is very, very important, it's part of what we're doing when we established that in that journey, how we were going to get there. It's about protecting that data and building confidence in that data, that data is secure so that your customers interact and feel confident interacting with you as a service provider, but that their data is safe and it is contained, even though we have these big data lakes that we're using to analyze what risks we should be managing. We're reaching out to our customers. In fact, just last year, as part of our sustainability report, we reached out to over 1 million people, our customer base, and asked them this very question. You know, what does sustainability mean to you? What does digitization mean to you? And it came back. You know, one was what we had talked about previously, but the one concern was about the moral use of their data, because it is their data, as well as protecting and keeping secure the data that they share with us. So those are the kind of things that we are having to adjust to. And it's been quite challenging because the applications that were built 10, 15 years ago, and we're starting from ground zero and building up. Now we're doing it with quite a few other helpful suppliers, but you know, they share the same type of common goals and aspirations that we do around achieving that digital journey. Our digital journey began, like I said, last year. It was in planning stage 2 years ago, but it's now in execution mode, and it'll go on for the next 2-3 years. But it's not just there. It's not just in the application space we're looking at as well. We're looking at the infrastructure space. We're modernizing our WAN interfaces so that when we do connect to our cloud providers, we're doing it in a very modern, efficient, and effective way. And that helps us reduce the overall footprint, or operating footprint, around the globe.
So Jonathan, James, let me just invite you to comment on that, because I'm sure you'll agree that this is one of the core issues, right, that the entire industry sort of focused on.
So I love that you brought up data, right? Data has been growing leaps and bounds, right? We've never seen anything like it before. And I love that you brought up security related to data and the ethics, right? Not only related to data, but AI, right? As we give more power to AI, how do we make sure that there are no biases in those decisions? I love that you talked about the transition to the cloud, right? It is not a lift and shift, because then you can't take advantage of microservices, right? And when I think about insurance and I think about data and decision making, I think about all the other industries that are creating data that we can use for underwriting, for example, or for claims, right? So how can I gamify life insurance and use wearables, for example, to create healthier lifestyles? What about telematics in the automotive industry and the direction that they're going in? What about embedded insurance, right, for the future as it relates to, you know, those autonomous vehicles? Or looking at manufacturing for workplace safety and workers' compensation, or farming and all the data that I can pull from a farm in order to cover them differently, right? And creating those digital experiences so that I have the information I need as a carrier to be able to provide that differentiated experience to my customer. So how do I service up the right data to the agent, for example, as it relates to a claim, so that they're not asking the same questions twice, right? So I can capture that information on the first call and put it directly into the customer record, so that that information is available to me as the individual providing them with the service. So data is incredibly critical, even in predicting what could happen and preventing, you know, just predicting that a hailstorm could come through your area and advise you to put your car in the garage, right, brings value to both the carrier and the customer. Yep. James, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I do. And
I had a sense you might have something to say about that, James.
but for me though, I'm in the depressing position of having to do everything Greg and Jonathan just said, which is dull, but there we go. But I think for me, what this brings me to is the fact that since, you know, the 1500s, insurance has had an incredibly well-defined sort of social ecosystem that has worked terribly well. it's now getting to the point where it needs a digital ecosystem to really help it survive and thrive. I thought Greg's point about his rewriting of systems is extremely interesting, because as somebody said, and I forget who it was, putting something in the cloud on its own is not digitization. It's putting something in the cloud. There's a whole raft of stuff that has to come alongside that, such as altered processes, altered ways of thinking. But fundamentally, what this does, what I believe digitization really does, actually for any industry, but especially for insurance, is open up the possibilities that can exist of it being able to use an enormous range of other services, some of which it hasn't even realized yet that it actually could use to improve the product, to make people's lives better, to avoid unnecessary losses, on the underwriting side. How great would that be, for the underwriters, if these things can in some way be predicted, perhaps by taking contemporary data generated by IoT, using their historic experiential data to put against it, and then put it on an AI platform to come up with a result. If you can predict things going forward in any sense, however mildly, you put yourself as a trusted advisor. You begin to become something of true benefit to your customers beyond simply writing a check and when something goes on. And for us at Equinix, the great part about that is that all requires interconnection via an ecosystem to this huge array of participants that will now be joining in the industry to help it prosper.
So James, and I'm going to ask Jonathan this question as well. You have the advantage of looking across the industry and looking at what lots of different organizations are doing.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see the ones that are doing things well.
Mm-hmm.
You get to see the ones that are perhaps taking not so right course. And sometimes the best lessons are lessons from failures rather than successes. So let me ask you this. Let's put Zurich aside for a moment. Look across your experiences. What are some ways that you feel like insurance companies are getting digital transformation wrong? And what kind of things should the audience sort of look at and say, hey, let's be wary of going down that path as well?
I love that question, because digital transformation is nothing new, right? We digitally transformed when we went from paper to a computer, right?
Not everybody did, but
yeah, but we went to the mainframe, and then mainframe to client server, right? So when you think about it, there are still paper processes, there are still mainframes, there's still siloed data sitting under people's desks. I would argue that collaboration has been a big issue, but through COVID, we've seen a lot of improvements around how we collaborate, and the tools that we've seen come to life, like Zoom and Teams, etc. But I think what I see across the industry is, customers are looking at things like claims, and they're saying, our claims experiences aren't personalized. They're taking too long. We're not using technology to enable these digital experiences. And to Greg's point, it's not just lifting and shifting stuff to the cloud, right? Because if I take a solution and I'm using infrastructure as a service, all I've done is I've taken the problems that I had in my data center and moved them to somebody else's data center, but I still have the same problems, right? So carriers are more and more thinking about, if I am going to migrate, what do I need to do to improve that solution and make it more digital? Do I update it before I migrate? Do I update it after I migrate? Do I continue with this homegrown solution? Do I look for software as a service as a solution, right? Do I want to, take a core system and just lift it and shift it to the cloud? Or do I want to find a core system that is cloud native, that is taking advantage of cloud services and will allow me to create the experiences I need to for my call center as it relates to next best action and providing more value to my customers, or giving the customers the self-service solutions that they need to do things on their own, because everybody's different and we need to meet the customer where they want to be met.
Right.
Otherwise, we're going to lose them, because it's very easy to change carriers in this day and age, and we need to be really focus on those experiences.
Right. That's
Yeah.
great. James,
And I'd like to just
please.
reinforce that, Chunka, if I can, because I think Jonathan made an outstanding point there at the
That's
end
one.
around meeting the
The
customer.
rest of them,
where they
Jonathan,
want to
not
be
so
met.
good, but that last point was really, really tough.
Well, but meeting the customer where they want to be met, I think is really, really
Yes.
important. And that digital journey enables you to do that. Some of our customers still want to do business over the phone, right? It's available. But others don't want to talk to anyone, and they want to do it through a chatbot or some AI element that enables them to get what they need, to get in, get out, and go, right? And I think it does help you better balance and manage that customer experience and how they want to interact with you, not how you want them to interact with you.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I think that's a very key point. Greg says, I mean, you know, we've been talking about omnichannel for forever, really, in the whole thing, and I think that remains as true as today as it was 10 years ago. In fact, in many ways, it's extraordinary that perhaps it hasn't moved on faster, but absolutely, you have to meet the customer where they want to be met. I think really beyond that, though, there are a couple of things that sort of alarm me when I begin to hear them. Number one is probably when a chief executive declares they're going to be cloud only, because that suggests to me there's a disconnect between them and the IT department, because only when you have a proper relationship with the IT department, only when, dare I say it, the IT department actually does have some weight within the organization, you know, and has the ability to advise, to become, if you like, an internal advisor to its organization. You know, in my career in insurance, too often IT has merely been seen as an expense rather than something that can actually benefit the organization. And I think as IT departments in insurance have grown and become more experienced and bluntly got better, which they have done, they are beginning to show how they can actually bring true business value to the organization as well, because then you start to see how you really can leverage digital from an internal perspective, you know, and take it out to the outside world and begin to bring in these things that Greg and Jonathan have been discussing. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that I think we often see, and this actually applies to a lot of our customer base, not just to insurance. We often see a situation where people have thought out parts of the equation very carefully, but don't seem to have given enough consideration to the entirety of the equation, because as we've already discussed, simply moving a system to the cloud is not digitization. And so I think the project plans need to be much bigger. I would say one thing in insurance's defense, like banks and so on, you know, it is a highly regulated industry. It is much easier for a no regulation industry to do digital things, because they're not constantly looking at what the regulatory impact might be, and we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great point. The degrees of freedom are less, and of course it differs across locales and all that. I want to come back to the question of experience, and I want to press the issue a little bit. I'm not disagreeing, but you know, the notion of going to where the customers want to be. Are we entering a time when the customers are increasingly don't know, or at least the circumstances around them are changing so quickly? So let me give you an example. You know, we've talked for a very long time about moving to digital experiences, and suddenly we were forced to do that, you know, much quicker. We did, and I think as an industry, we did that very well and much quicker than any of us thought we could. But now we have this hard challenge of trying to figure out hybrid, right? Where some people want digital and some people want face-to-face, and sometimes they want that different people want both at the same time. You have to deal with now, what does a hybrid experience look like? Where some people are there and some people aren't, and you want them all to be first-class participants in that interaction. how are each of your organizations thinking about hybrid experiences and getting to support the models for hybrid experiences?
So I'm going to start that because obviously there's a lot we do to enable a hybrid experience. And we're having a lot of discussions with customers who are struggling with it, right? Some are wondering, do I really need real estate anymore? You know, am I getting value out of that real estate investment, or should I be doing something different? But I think the key is, you know, whether you're in the room or you're online, everybody needs to feel included, right? And you know, let's think about the whole diversity and inclusion thing, right? Just because the four of us are in different locations and having a discussion doesn't mean that this discussion can't be intimate, right? How do you as a carrier provide white glove services if you're used to doing it in person and you can't anymore, right? How do you, you know, provide somebody with a life insurance policy in a day and a half without collecting liquids if you can't go to their house and do that, right? This is where digitization and the need for solutions for a hybrid culture, right, is really necessary, because whether you're in the room with me or not, I've got to be able to recognize that you're here for me and that, you know, you're supporting my needs and my experiences. And if we can't be in the same room, I need to still feel the same way and to feel included, right? Greg made a comment about travel, right? That 5 years ago, I was traveling to Japan for 2-hour meetings, right? I don't have to do that anymore. And I really didn't have to do it then, but we didn't know it yet. So, you know, while hybrid is to a certain extent a challenge for people to wrap their heads around, you know, when you think about a metaverse, and that's something that's coming up too now, where we could all be in the same room and not be, but create an experience. And that's what it's about. It's about that experience, that feeling, you know, being part of something. And if you can't do that in person, you're not going to do it in a hybrid environment, right? So you've got to really focus on that customer. You've got to be customer obsessed and experience obsessed to make sure that everybody's getting what they need to be effective. And guess what? We're going to fail a couple of times. But Chunka, to your point, that's how we learn and that's how we get better.
Greg, how are you thinking about this?
So I'm absolutely aligned with what Jonathan said. And it goes back to what we were reinforcing earlier around meeting the customer where they want to be met. The last 2 years have been quite the journey. And when I say that, I mean internally as well, because we had to ask ourselves, back to the comment around real estate, you know, it's been 2 years. We have all demonstrated the fact that we can use the internet to do a lot of neat things, and we can work from anywhere we want to be, but we also need to be able to interact with our customers in the same way we would if we were in an office setting. So the challenge that we've had is, how do we provide our business units the same affordability of that interaction or that customer experience that they had when they were in the office? And what we've been able to do is sit down, listen to our agents, talk to the business units, ask them what tools do they use, what tools do they need. And the challenge there is adaptability, of course, and adoptability. But we've been very successful in allowing the systems, whether it's contact centers or whether it's, you know, the systems that are serving up the, you know, processing claims, issuing policies, they're accessible in or out of the office to the agents that have to serve those requests. And I think that if we really take a hard look, the challenge for me is going to be, how much adaptability can we encourage our business units to take on so that it's not so disruptive that the technology, the digitization that we're introducing becomes overwhelming. And I think if you look at it, and this is where I have to separate the technology side from the business side, because from a technology side, it's easy for me to push technology. And it's easy for me to say, oh, well, this is the next generation. It's faster, it's better, and it's cheaper. But the business unit will say to me, yeah, but I can't use it. And then I'm defeated at that point. Our chief digitization officer, when he came on board, he took a really, really different approach toward how business and IT work together. And instead of thinking about what the next big shiny thing is going to be, and that's what we need to push, or what does our strategic roadmap look like for the next version of contact center that we're going to go to, he went straight to the business and said, I'm going to help you be more profitable. What tools do you need to interact with your customer and enrich your customer experience? And from there, and using that input is what we're using to drive our strategic roadmaps, what our next 3-year strategy cycle looks like. It's not about doing things in a big IT outsourced arrangement. It's not about going to the big, we'll call them gorillas in the room that can deliver everything, but it's about getting more specific for the things that we truly need and our business needs, and working with those specialists to deliver those capabilities so they can meet the customer where they want to be met.
And that's ultimately where it's what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah.
That's right.
So it's amazing how time flies, and the time has flown by much quicker than this moderator has planned for. But I think we'll take a couple more minutes, because I want to actually allow the panelists to get the last word in on this really big issue. Any last bits of advice or thoughts that you would have for the audience on how they should think about their digital transformation in the context of sustainability? Jonathan, can I start with you?
Sure. So somebody said something earlier in the week, last week, that I thought was really interesting. If you know one insurance company, you know one insurance company, right? Every carrier is different and they have different needs. So I think the most important thing is to really understand the customer priorities, right? What are your priorities as it relates to digitization and your customers? And then really be planful about how you migrate, how you modernize, how you take advantage of digital ecosystems, and really what your journey is. What does it need to look like over the next 5 years? Because again, everybody's a little different, and some people are a lot different. And because we're kind of on the same journey, but they are going to look different, it really needs to start with, where am I today? Where do I want to be tomorrow? And how do I build the steps to get from point A to point B successfully?
Well said. James.
I think the sort of closing comment I would make, and in many ways it comes back to the hybrid environment that this industry and others finds itself in today, which is to say that to me, this now is looking to be about platforms. No one organization can flourish in the digital world without the involvement and help of others. They have to leverage platforms in order to be able to access things. And if we think about insurance, for example, to get access to it, you're going to need the likes of AT&T or Verizon or BT and Vodafone, who will get you, they will get your data to and from a point with 5G or whatever other, means it might be. You're going to have to involve on the carrier side, brokers of some sort, and vice versa with them, other insurance companies, reinsurers, and so on. You're going to involve, AI services from, the likes of NVIDIA and people like that. Dedicated claim services, dedicated services that know your customer, that do anti-money laundering, all those kinds of things, which together do actually make a rich, sticky package of services the customer properly. So to me, really, the future lies in platforms. The future lies very much in digital ecosystems.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Greg, you get the last word on the last word. What's your advice to your colleagues?
So I love what James and Jonathan have covered, and would just reinforce and echo some of the comments that they've made, and especially James, your comments around service chaining. Service chaining is huge, because you're right. No one company is going to do it all for themselves. But what's really important is understanding what companies you do partner with and where they sit in that sustainability service chain. And in my mind, if I were to offer any advice to anyone, I would offer the advice that we gave ourselves, and that is, it's one thing to say we're going to do all these wonderful things and how it's going to impact our environments and our customers and ultimately, the bottom line with the company. But it's another thing to measure the effectiveness of what it is you're implementing. And I would give the advice that, data is absolutely important in understanding your digital journey and the success that you're trying to achieve. So find a metric that is scientific, that works for you, that can measure your success toward what it is you're journeying toward. We use the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a guideline. As I mentioned at the opening, we cover through 6 of them, and they cover the topics that we've covered in this discussion today. And it is about digitization, it's about controlling data, it's about climate change. All those are really, really important to know where you stand on what activities you're embarking on. And another scientific measure that we use is CO2e. And it's a little different than measuring your carbon footprint, but it allows you to measure bundles of carbon emissions together in one number. And we measure ourselves against that, and we report on that on an annual basis. So the collection of data towards your progress and whatever sustainability goals you have in whatever area you're reaching into, find that metric that works for you and use it to drive the decisions you make toward what future you want to achieve.
That's great advice. That's great advice. So with that, I would like to thank the panelists, Jonathan, James, Greg, for joining us. Fascinating conversation as always. And of course, really just sort of the start of a conversation, or a small bit in the conversation that needs to happen. So I'll invite the audience. Please feel free to reach out to us collectively, individually, to continue this conversation because there's a lot to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.